Who am I? Just what am I? What do I do here? What is my purpose? I'm the world's only gameplay philosopher. It's a new branch of philosophy I created on my own about 2 years ago, and it's, I would say, the newest thing in philosophy for several hundred years. The thing about gameplay philosophy is it's not an instruction manual on how to function in the real world, because gameplay and the real world, they should be the same thing, or we can believe that they're the same thing. We don't actually know if they are, and the rules of the game are not the same as the rules of the real world. We don't have a quantized time system. You do have that in gaming. You don't have that in the real world. You also don't have objective results in the real world, which is another thing you do have in the gaming world. And by that, one person wins, and there's always a loser. And that's the gaming world, and you do have that. In fact, you only have that. If you got very good at the game, you could probably work backwards and reapply that to real life. I'm sure. We don't know if you can. And in a lot of cases, people who do get good at a game or gameplay, they aren't able to reapply it to real life. In the real world, you can't even prove gameplay exists. So it's truthfully a hard or unworking place to be. It's something that it takes real wonder and a real question to actually solve. What is better? How do you win in the real world? Especially when there's no clear reward and it's seemingly random most of the time. We can't even prove if gameplay exists in the real world. If we are living in a simulation, for example, then we have no idea if gameplay wouldn't exist, right? Gameplay would be made up, or it would purely apply only to the video game. But this is where gaming in the video game and gameplay does work, because even if the world's a simulation, well, the game, for example, kind of circumvents that, because it doesn't care if the world's a simulation. It is a simulation. The video game is already a simulation, so it doesn't matter if reality is real or fake. These are things we can't tell, and they might change things a lot, but not relevant in the game, in the video game. So recently I was watching a philosophy show, and a guy said that results are the only objective truth in the world, and then the guy hosting the show says, what the hell does that mean? That's not a real statement. That doesn't mean anything. And I personally do think that holds a lot of weight, where if something happens, then you know that that is a truth for certain. If you say you feel some way, you don't know that you feel that way. You do know that you said you feel that way, right? So the only things that are objectively stable are results, are things that have actually happened. You know they happened, you know it's real, you know the circumstances to make them happen were within the laws of the universe. You could conjecture very simple things to happen, and oftentimes you can actually control very simple things, and you could argue that those are manageable, those are recreatable, and I will only give a half truth on that, and that actually is what natural gameplay functionally is. You don't know if that's true, but gameplay, again, circumvents this, where actually objective results are within means of truth. So if somebody says, I lost, or I died, or I failed because X, Y, Z, we don't know that, right? We know that they failed, though. We do know that they failed, and I think if there's incontrovertible evidence of something, if there's video proof of it, which is gameplay, then you know for a fact that that happened. What if people's feelings or visions are wrong? Honestly, I think that stuff, it's a little too silly. It's a little dumb. If we really are in a simulation and we can't perceive certain dimensions, or we can't perceive certain aspects of something, then even then what we can perceive would just make out the world. So what we can't perceive, we kind of would have to write off. So I asked the question, how do you get better at something? How do you improve at a game? And how do you objectively improve at a game? Because if you practice something, then you could argue that you'll get better at that, but you might get worse at it. Your results might get worse. You might get distracted and not practice something that's more important. So most people's agenda when they practice something is totally missing the point, and it's totally wrong, because they think if you just practice you'll get better, when in reality that might not be the case. And actually oftentimes I'll argue it is completely not the case. So in order to do that, I had to reevaluate and remap, and why you do things, I had to make everything stem from one fundamental layer of why you do things, and I call this understanding. So how you understand things that leads you to do A or B, and we can make the difference there between decisions. So if you have one of two decisions, you're always going to do one decision or the other, and then why you did the decision, it's because of how you understand the system. So you'll always do that decision versus the other if the circumstances are correct. Now, it might be a complex situation where there's millions or an infinite number of possibilities, or there might be basic underlying instincts or subconscious reasons that you do something, but that's still within the realm of understanding. So basically every decision you make is rooted in how you understand the system. For example, fight or flight is still rooted in how you understand if you are about to die, you don't want to die, and you can either fight and win, or you can run away and live. There's not a whole lot else you can do there, and that is how your system understands the circumstances. So a lot of this is kind of hard to change. Like, for example, the fight or flight response, you're not going to be able to change that most likely, or a lot of your subconscious or your muscle memory stuff, there's not a whole lot you can do about it because that's ingrained in your body. But you guys would be surprised by how much you can change and how much control you do have over your system. So basically, how you understand things, results are derived from, and that's really important because results are ultimately what you're after. But there's actually a caveat to this. It's not true, because what about random factors? So let's say you completely understand something identical to somebody else or identical to yourself previously, and then you guys both go into the gameplay system and you get two totally different results. Like, how or why did that happen? And random factors for one, but also just random elements. So results are derived from how you understand the game going through the gameplay system. And so what we'll say is that you have an understanding, an underlying understanding, and then gameplay is derived from that, and then results are derived from the gameplay. And that is how you achieve a result, or that's how your brain achieves a result. And then if you go into a system with how you think, two things are going to have two important things here. One, your gameplay result spread is going to be mostly identical no matter what you do, no matter what you go into, what type of game it is, because how you think, it doesn't change, right? And so you get mostly the same result spread. You might get luckier, you might have different frame rolls, different random factors, right? Because gameplay systems, it's super complex, and we're at an elementary stage in the gameplay systems in 2018. We're rather elementary level, and so if you look 500 years from now, or even if you look at some complex things right now like virtual reality and a lot of these more complex games, especially team games, then the gameplay systems start to get more complex. So you're gonna get different results, but generally you get the same spread. And if you could magically make time go to infinity, we'll just say you get the same end result, right? So this isn't entirely true, because as you play the game, you learn things, and how you understand the game changes. So if you had two different people playing different games, they would learn differently, right? They might learn different things, and so they would get unique end results, even if it's the same person going into two different gameplay systems. Okay, the second one that's really important here is that people, if they don't want to do something, if they don't like something, and somebody tells them to do it because it's better, and they do it, but they don't like it, they don't learn. Well, generally they don't learn. Maybe they will learn, or maybe they'll learn the wrong thing, or maybe they'll learn random stuff that's not relevant, but the point is, they generally are not going to learn, and that is a very big problem, because what happens is you can waste a lot of time trying to do something that you don't agree with or you don't want to do. Somebody just told you it's better, and then your system says, no, this is bad, and the whole thing collapses. Or you get stuck, and I call this an ego trap, because what it is functionally is you trying to achieve the right result without the understanding, right? And that's derived from ego. If you were truly skilled enough, you could achieve that result through understanding. It would be achieved naturally because you think that's the best thing to do. Ego is when you desire a result and then you try to achieve that result when you don't even think it's a good result, right? Because you think you are better than you are, or you think you're different than you are, and so you try to do a result that's not you. That's egotistical, right? Egotism. That's ego. That's why it's called ego theory, because the person is trying to do a result without actually understanding it. So people get stuck in this loop, and then kaboom, they don't do anything with their lives. The alternative is, if you try to understand something, you could do that end result, you could achieve that end result naturally if that was meritable, if it was a real thing, if it was all superior to what you were doing, you could actually achieve it naturally, which is far more powerful, and it's also in line with reality. And that's a statement a lot of people have over the years said, you know, that what does that mean? And for me, what it means is, in the natural world, only the things that are happening you can argue are true and false. So if you're stuck in an ego trap trying to do something you don't know how to do because you want to be right, that's what an ego trap is. If you were doing that, you'd still be within reality, because everything that happens is reality, right? So that would still be reality, and that's kind of the problem, and that's kind of what ego theory attempts to solve, is that why would somebody do that? Why would somebody basically intentionally lose by doing something that they can't do, or attempting to do something they can't do, and then they continually get this bad result? And I argue it's human ego. They're afraid, they're insecure, and so they try to be right. They're obsessed with being correct, and because if they're correct, then they win. And this is basically the gameplay problem. Like, this is the gameplay problem, because people will spend their whole career, or their whole life, or their entire life of gameplay trying to do something that they can't do, and then they never go anywhere. Meanwhile, you take somebody who just does what he can do, he does what he can do, and they get better results. That's the trick here. They get better results. That's the only thing that matters here. So I call that ego theory. I call that an ego trap, and that's what ego theory is. And my argument is that that's happening for everybody, for everything, because people want to be right, or they're obsessed with being right. Or maybe it happens when people start to doubt themselves. Now, there's no hard evidence for that. There's no good argument. It's a conjecture. It's what I believe in. It's something that's how I perceive the world, right? But there's no real argument for that. There's no real, it's mostly conjecture. Now, that's okay, because natural gameplay, it solves this problem without actually acknowledging the problem, and so you can pretty much ignore that. It doesn't really matter. If it really is a problem, if that's really happening, then it's going to be solved through natural gameplay anyway. The thing about natural gameplay is it argues, basically it's naturalism with a twist of gameplay. It's applied to gameplay. So if somebody does something, then that's what their brain led them to do, right? That's how they understand the game, and that was the result of how they understand the game. So let's talk about what's optimal, because if you want to get better at the game, that's the original question, right? How do you get better at a game? If you want to get better at a game, you have to do the best things, right? You have to do the best things, and you have to understand the game the best, right? So you have to do the optimal thing, and that's what optimal is. It's the best. So somebody comes up to you and they say, this strat's optimal, right? And I say, why is it optimal, right? And he says, it's the best thing to do. And they provide no further reasoning, and you kind of are like, I don't know, I don't agree with him, right? So you don't understand the game the same way he understands the game. And I think this is interesting, because these two people, I hope they're competitors, I hope they compete. One of them's gonna win, right? And so one of them could at least argue with his results, with his gameplay, that he's doing the right thing and the other guy's doing the wrong thing. But that doesn't really do a whole lot. That doesn't really get us anywhere. So what we're gonna do is look at a speed run, and this is why I like speed running, because everything's quantified in terms of time reigns supreme. So it's actually a deeper level of gameplay and gaming, and it's easier to quantify things that are optimal and things that are not optimal. So let's take a screen, for example, and we find the fastest way to go through the screen, and I say this is the best way to do it, and then the guy next to me finds a way that's 15 frames faster. It's only possible on a task environment, and he says, no, this is optimal. And this is the big question, where is what he said better, or is what I said better? Because what he said is not possible by human means, or at least it's never been completed by a human. And what I proposed, anybody can do it any day of the week, any run, and it's 100% consistent. So who has the better strat? It's pretty easy to say my strat's better, right? Because you can't even do his strat. But that's pretty true, actually, and you see that not as extreme in a lot of cases, where two people are arguing for a specific strategy or a specific approach to the game, and one strategy or approach, you don't even know if it's possible, you don't even know if you can do it, and the other strategy or approach, super simple, super easy. Or maybe both strategies are too complex to know if you can even reliably do it. Or maybe what happens is they give variable frame counts on average, or there's a lot of different factors, and so what's really optimal in every situation, super complex. But this isn't so complicated if you look at it through a naturalistic perspective, because if something's not happening, then you can basically just discard it because it's not possible, right? It's conceptually it's possible. Somebody believes that it's possible, they think that it's possible, but it's not happening, so therefore it's not possible. It's the same thing where, why don't people have wings, right? Why can't people fly? Why don't they have wings? And it's not possible. It was never possible to have wings, and we don't even know if it would be better if we have wings, because if we had wings, we may have never evolved technology. We may have never built roads, and then a lot may have been worse, right? So maybe it's better to not have wings. So it's the same argument with gameplay. Maybe it's better to do the thing that's faster. Maybe it's better to not do the thing that's faster. We don't know if the thing that's technically faster is a better strategy. And if you look at real-time attack, I think this is even more interesting, because this point is belabored even more, where somebody does things that are simple and easy and gets a very, very good time, and somebody does things that are very complicated and hard. Whose run is better, right? Whose strats are better? Well, you would go with the guy who's winning, not the guy who has worse strats and claims they're better, right? This is another ego trap. This is what I call ego theory, or it's a reflection of ego theory, where a guy is saying that his strats are better, he wants his strats to be correct, he's forcing his strats, but we don't know if they're correct because he's never actually completed it. The only thing we know is that he's failing to complete it. So those strategies are comparable with failing to complete them. So I think most people have this deeply ingrained in their system anyway, because this is actually the story of evolution in gameplay, and a lot of people over billions of years have done this. And if you look at pretty much any cartoon or any story in history that's good or recognizable or memorable, they all have this general theme, and it's basically the theme where the hero has to believe in himself and then he wins, and the enemy needs some kind of tool or device, or he needs some sort of controller power, and therefore he's stronger, right? And so always what happens is the guy who believes in himself can keep growing and keep getting bigger, and the enemy who has some kind of transformation or needs dependent on something, right, they lose because their gameplay is functionally weaker, and that's the big gameplay question. You actually can sort of see it with gameplay. So generally, what's optimal and what's not optimal, this whole idea where this is optimal because I did a task, it's not relevant, it's not recognizable, it's completely irrelevant. In fact, what people who are winning, what they're doing is functionally optimal. There's probably something better in a lot of cases, but with the circumstances, the guy who's on top, he's doing the optimal strats, or because he's winning, right? And actually, it's not even really the strats that matter here. Why is he doing the strats? That's what matters, because if you can replicate why somebody's doing something, then you could actually go deeper, you could do more, you could make your own twist on it and do even better if you understand the system better, right? So understanding the system seems like the most important thing, and actually that's, I think, what really matters is looking at the system. But it's super important to get rid of this idea that I'm doing the best strat because it's fastest or whatever made up reason. I mean, you can find any number of noobs and ask them why they do the strats, because basically, if you don't play a game, if you played a game for like 10 hours, pretty much discard everything you do or everything you think about the game, like who cares. But ultimately, people do in the game what they think is best, right? So people are doing what they think is optimal. They think they're doing what they think is best, even at a very, very low level. So I've always wanted to debate somebody on this point. Do people really do and pursue what they think is optimal? Do people in a vacuum only pursue what they think is the best thing to do? And let's say somebody says, you're wrong, WQ. People can opt for, they can pursue not the optimal choice. They can pursue something that is worse, right? And so I will say, how can you pursue something or opt for something that you don't think is the best thing to do? Even if somebody chose to do absolutely nothing because stress reasons, right? Maybe it's just overwhelming them and they want to do worse, or they want to lose so maybe a friend can do better. I mean, this is still in their mind the ideal thing to do. Even if somebody's addicted to something like methamphetamines and they're destroying themselves, well, they still choose to do these drugs because it's something in their mind, and yeah, it's an addiction, has chosen that this is ideal, this is the optimal thing to do. Other things don't matter as much. So the only real way I could see somebody possibly not pursuing the best is if they were completely brain dead and they had no freedom, they had no choice. But then you can't really make choices. So if anybody has interesting arguments on that, post those arguments below. But my main point about that is that people's perceptions of what's ideal and what's not ideal, oftentimes it's not trustable, it's not trustworthy. Yet they believe in that and they can't radically change their belief now. But if they lose, they're wrong. They're just flat out wrong because they're not winning. So this is where natural gameplay comes in handy, because what natural gameplay really means is that you aren't able to do something if it's not happening, right? And so if you can control something functionally, that means it's natural. And then so if you have gameplay that you can control, then that gameplay is natural gameplay, and then it actually circumvents this ego problem where somebody's trying to do something that they can't do. Because another thing about this ego problem where somebody's constantly trying to do it and they never succeed, a lot of the times people do that because they think if they are finally successful, they'll get this huge payoff and it's going to be worth it in the long run, and that is possible. But again, this is kind of the problem with ego. If it's doable at some point in the future, it should be doable now. So trying to go through these extreme circumstances to do something you can't do, that is bad. Makes no sense. It's not possible, right? So you're wasting your time. Also, find out how to do it and then you'll be more successful. Also, we don't know that what somebody's pursuing, we don't know that it's possible. We don't know if there is going to be a big payout. We don't know if that it's worth it at all. So there's a lot of problems here, and you can't simply pretend it doesn't exist. You can't simply change how you think. But I think if you guys, or if people think a lot about why they do things, gameplay, what they pursue, and they also go through real life experiences, I do think people can make a shift. And guys, that's actually how I discovered natural gameplay, is that I lost a match of Melee and I was wondering, why did I lose? And it just hit me that if I have more recreatable gameplay strategies, I'm going to perform better in the long run. And since then, I'm like, okay, I have to do this, right? Because my understanding of gameplay shifted. And that was all through real experience and work. And I think thinking about these concepts and working with these concepts and working with these ideas and being more open to different types of gameplay, that was a big deal, because what that means is that when I experienced that loss and my brain started thinking, what did I do wrong? What could I do better? What happened was I had a lot of material that previously I didn't have, and so I was able to do a lot more thinking than previously when I had encountered a really tough loss. And I'm like, well, what now? Now when I encountered a tough loss, I was like, what now? I'm like, wait a minute, there's certain steps I can go through. There's one more thing though, guys, I gotta talk about. To not pursue ego is ego, right? It's still forcing something. So forcing something's bad, that's what it boils down to. But not forcing yourself to not force something, it's still a force. So what that fundamentally means when you come out of it is recreatable gameplay fixes this problem, right? Recreatable gameplay completely trumps this problem, because you can't force something. If you do something that you know how to do and you can recreate, you can't force it. It's impossible to force it, and so you never force anything. Oh shit, that guy's stealing my pool. The guy's literally stealing my fucking pool. Did you guys see that shit? That's my pool I had yesterday, remember? He's fucking stealing it. Like, what the fuck? I was gonna swim in there. Anyway, gamers, I'm gonna see you guys later. WQ out, and make sure you guys get out there and game, and I want you guys to dominate. I want you guys to completely dominate and win in the gamers verse, in the game universe. Make your enemies suffer. I want you guys to make your enemies crumble and make it so extreme that it's actually a recreatable gameplay thing. You're actually better than someone, because if you improve something, you do something, it's completely recreatable and it's 10 frames, right? And then let's say I propose a new strat that's 7 frames, and it's also completely recreatable. You are actually a better player. You are actually proven by the numbers straight up a better player. Both strats are recreatable. You actually become a better player. That's a very powerful thing. And if you dissect gameplay and look at gameplay and really take apart gameplay, You can radically improve overnight through a lot of effort, through a lot of practice, but honestly not that much practice. You can radically improve because that is an actual simple way to improve. Anyway, I'll see you guys later.